Hello, and thank you so much for joining me once again. Today I have for you the much anticipated romper pattern that Choo released some time back. I must admit, I was intimidated by this one for some reason. Maybe it's because I've never sewn a romper before. Well, regardless, let's jump in. Here are the pattern pieces for this garment. I've labeled them with what I call them going forward. We've got the top front, which you only cut one of, the top back, which you cut two, bottom front, cut two, bottom back, cut two, and the waistband you only need one of. They all make sense to me, until this page, which I know has baffled others as well. There's a lot of notes here, and when you don't read Japanese, that's quite intimidating. I know by process of elimination that they're mostly in regards to the shoulder straps and maybe the waist tie. The diagonal grain lines here suggest the straps are made from bias tape, which is cool. I've been doing that with my halter tops for a while now. I also saw this little doodle on the front pattern piece. This tells me the straps need to be 6.5 centimeters long, which is really useful information. Well, I have a basic idea now, so on to fabric selection. I know this pattern is intended for super lightweight wovens, but I don't really have any, so I opted for this really lovely knit instead. I like the drape to it, and I feel like it'll work. Now we cut. I'm careful to follow the grain lines on all my pieces, even though knit fabric behaves differently from woven fabric. Even knits can hang funny when they aren't cut on grain. The only exception I make is with the shoulder straps. The pattern indicates they are bias cut, which for woven fabrics means that they need extra stretch that the woven fabric wouldn't have when cut on the grain. Instead, I cut these on grain as well because the knit has plenty of stretch, so I'm not too worried. I mark everything I think is relevant, which is kind of silly because almost all my heat erase markings disappear long before I needed them. Whoops. First I sew the back-bottom pieces to their top-back counterparts. I also sew the bottom-front pieces together at the crotch seam. Then I run them through the serger to finish the edges. This isn't hugely important with knits, but I like how it looks. Then I iron the seams thoroughly. Next up, I attach the bottom front pieces to the top front and sew together the center back seam. I'm going to keep the stand opening, so I finish the center back edges with the serger first. Then I'm careful to stop stitching right before the opening and start up again underneath it. That way I can iron the seam open instead of to the sides like my other serged edges. This leaves the stand opening accessible. I top stitch around the stand opening just a millimeter from the edge. This holds the seam allowance down and it just looks nice. Then I make a mistake. I sew the side seam shut too early. I will deeply regret this. Oh, look, I serge it too. Back at the ironing table, I use a tailor's sausage to iron them flat without squishing the rest of the fabric. Then I try in vain to iron my knit strips into something resembling bias tape. They aren't having it. The knit has a spring to it that resists my best efforts. The next bit is how I prefer to attach bias tape. There's actually quite a few ways to do it, but I feel like I get the best exterior finish this way. I pin the strip to the fabric with the right side of the strip facing the wrong side of the fabric. I know it seems wrong, but bear with me. Then I sew it down with my needle all the way to the right, so it's only got about a 4mm seam allowance. This is the tricky part. I fold the strip all the way over the raw edge and then tuck the raw edge of the strip under as well. I also make a very tiny snip going towards my stitching line where the V of the neckline is, just to release tension later on. Then I top stitch about 1mm from the edge. You want to be very careful with this stitching because it's extremely noticeable when it's wobbly. Like with the V-neck t-shirt, I then fold the front edge in the center and sew the tiniest line to pinch it in, providing the shaping in the centered front. And I realize my mistake now. I know I need to pin the shoulder strap along the arm opening edge, as well as extend it up to become the strap itself. It's just too awkward to work with like this, so I need to rip the side seams. Ripping serging is the worst. Once they're open, I'm able to attach the strip to the front, measure that 6.5 centimeters we figured out at the beginning, then pin the rest along the back. This is the same for both shoulder straps. Then we sew them with the narrow seam allowance, fold them over the raw edge, and top stitch, just like we did with the other strips. The straps themselves basically just fold in on themselves, creating a nice clean strip. Now we sew those side seams back up again. To finish the leg hems, I serged them on the machine first. While I was there, I also serged along the long edge of the waistband on both sides. Then I ironed the leg seams up by 1 centimeter as indicated on the pattern, and I ironed the serged edges on the waistband inwards. Next up, I hem the leg opening and I stitch down the short ends of the waistband after turning them in 1/4 inch. I start pinning the waistband by finding the middle and pinning it to the center back. Because my markings were lost with all the ironing, I refer back to the pattern to determine where the front ends of the waistband need to sit. I really take my time with this step since it's kind of the central feature of this design and I want everything to be even. Because we haven't sewn the legs of the romper together yet, we can still top stitch the waistband down. Most machines have a way to narrow your sewing surface for doing things like sleeve cuffs. Mine just involves moving this little back portion out of the way. Make sure not to sew the narrow edges of the waistband down. We need that open later to thread the drawstring through. Now that the top stitching is done, I can finally close the inseam of the shorts portion of the romper. I just stitch this on the sewing machine and then finish the edge on the serger. I usually use a long plastic threading tool for this, but honestly I found the shorter safety pin worked best for stringing the cord through the waistband. Once I've evened out the ends and tied a little knot in them, the romper is done. I'm very pleased with how this project turned out. It's pretty fun to tackle something so different from my normal stuff. My only regret is that I think the knit shoulder straps might have stretched a little too much while I was sewing, because the top is very, very low and does take a little bit of time to adjust to get it to sit properly. This was my own fault, of course. I should have used woven bias tape like the pattern suggested instead of knit straps. Overall though, I'm super happy with this project. I had a lot of fun trying to think up ways to film that would be more fun to watch too. Did you like the end results? I hope you had as much fun as I did. Subscribe for more videos like this and have a great one!